So, do you believe that Hollywood has a stereotype that the writers always be a psycho person?
It'll just give them more real-time access to information, like airspeed and who's coming in from the west, and it helps. And he's probably going to make a lot of money selling that.
Yeah, agree.
But it can also, the downside is it can replace people's jobs. It's okay if it doesn't sell. I can use this for something else. It'll be useful and career-wise. So it's a tough business. So that can be very self-destructive. It puts you a lot of depression, can kick in, frustration.
Many times the Hollywood tells that writers has to be the original.
You have to be original, but not too original.
So, what should I call you? That is this a psychotherapist or the screenwriter? Who are
Yeah.
you?
Well, both. Both.
What is the story that makes your career nearly destroy your mental health? Now meet the one man who's seen all the sides. He's not just a legendary TV and the film writer, he is also a psychotherapist for creatives. David Silverman has written for over 30 shows, from the Wild Thornberry and the South Park to Robin Williams, Alf, and the Sarah Williams. He's created hit series, written the studio films, and now he's written something even riskier, a brutally honest book called How to Be a Rockstar Screenwriter. Why you should watch this? Because this isn't your average writing advice. We talk about the burnout, the perfectionism, the procrastinations, and the pain. We ask, does a great writing require madness? Can a highly sensitive person survive in the Hollywood? And are we secretly rewarding suffering while pretending to care about well-being? This episode is a deep cut for anyone who ever dreamed for writing and anyone who has been crushed by the dream. This is the Samir Show, and today we are not just talking about the scripts, we are talking about the scars behind them. So, hi David, good evening. How are you? And welcome to the Samir Show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really excited for me that right now you are the second person that I have recently podcast. That the one of the podcasts that I have written taken with one of the lady that she was a director and she was running a kind of a school. And today I'm glad to have that you have the fantastic, you have written so many things, so many scripts that you have worked in the Bollywood. So what should I call you? That is this a psychotherapist or the screenwriter? Who
Oh,
are
yeah.
you?
Well, both. Both. I've been a screenwriter longer than I've been a psychotherapist. I started as a screenwriter, and then I transitioned into psychotherapy.
So right now you're a full-time psychotherapist or the screenwriter?
You know, I'm spending more time on psychotherapy than I am on writing, but I still write. I just had recently had a horror script, a low budget horror script that an editor.
Hmm.
A lot of people get their movies made this way. Like everybody in Hollywood wants to direct, right?
Right, I agree.
And guys like assistant directors or casting directors, even, and editors, they want to direct.
Mm.
So I was approached by this guy. He's edited some very big horror films, like The Nun, and some big ones
Hmm.
and they're well done. So he wants to direct. So I happen to have a low budget horror script that he liked, and so I've been working with him on. So even though I see clients as a
Hmm.
psychotherapist, I'm still writing all the time. You know.
So can you just brief about that, how you start your journey about the screenwriter?
Yeah. So it's funny because I originally wanted to be a psychotherapist.
Okay.
I went to a prestigious university, Stanford University, very well known.
Hmm.
And they had a terrific psychology department. So I went and did that. I graduated with honors, and then while I was there, I took a couple of creative writing classes, and then I decided, well, maybe I should try this. I like it,
Okay.
and so I made a student film. And then I applied to USC, the graduate program. They have a film school there. That's one of the best, USC film school. So I got
Mhm.
in there, and then I started writing scripts, and I met a my writing partner there. At USC, everybody wants to be George Lucas. They want to make. Uh, Nobody wants to write comedy. Like
Right.
so, it's just me and my this other guy. I found another guy there.
Hmm.
We started writing TV scripts, like for sitcoms like Taxi, and yeah, it was didn't take very long. We got hired in probably a year later, and we were on staff at a show called One Day at a Time.
So what you are best at to write is thrilling, horror, or comedy?
Yeah, comedy is really what I'm best at. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
It's more fun, but I'm starting to get interested in other genres. Yeah,
that's why that you have written that you have worked with the PV Herman.
yeah. Pee Wee. Yeah, I worked with Pee Wee. That was yeah. He was working on a TV pilot, and there was so I have a couple writing partners, both of them named Steve.
Okay.
We the group of us all met at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel downtown. It's like on Hollywood Boulevard. It's like a famous thing.
Okay.
And Pee Wee had his the studio had rented out the penthouse in that place, and it was really great, huge penthouse. And every day we would meet there for maybe a month or two and write. That was a lot of fun. He was a really funny guy, and really enjoyed the process. Unfortunately, the show didn't get picked up, but
Okay.
you know, it's
So
it's a
when
long shot. Anything gets on the air, it's a miracle. And I've gotten 5 shows on the air. I still can't believe it.
so when did you get your first break and how did you get it?
Yeah, so the first break, I guess it came from. So I remember I told you about this guy Steve I met at USC,
Mhm.
and we wrote a couple of half-hour TV pilots. So it's like we wrote an episode of Taxi.
Okay.
And back then, that show won Emmys. It was a really good show, and we thought of a good story for that. Um, and then he had a relationship with one of the producers on Mork and Mindy, this guy named Ed Charlack,
Mhm.
and so he'd sent some stuff to Ed before, and he liked it, but he didn't think he could do anything with it, and so he sent our Taxi to this guy. And back then, Mork and Mindy was like the #1 show on television. It was
Mhm.
really doing well. And they called us in to pitch some ideas. So, when you go in to pitch TV show ideas, you come up with maybe 10 ideas that might make good episodes. And I don't know if you remember Mork and Mindy, but he was an alien from
Mhm.
another planet, and Mindy was his roommate. She was a Earthling, and he was learning about what it's like to be, a human being. So we had a whole bunch of stories. We pitched one, and we sold it. So that was the first thing we did, and those producers were really. It's kind of unusual. You don't see this very often, but they they called some of their other friends who were producers,
Mhm.
and in the one case, uh, they talked to Jay Moriarty, who was producing the Jeffersons at the time, which that's another big show in the '80s. It's like the #2 show on the air,
Okay.
and we ended up selling 3 episodes of that. And
So at that time you already written the screenplay
uh,
when you pitch to that producer that you have already written that screenplay.
oh no, when they say come in and pitch, like what happens is they read some material of yours.
Mhm.
We read, we sent them the Taxi episode, different show.
Oh, okay.
They liked the writing, and so we didn't start with a Jefferson script, but we
Mhm.
had some story ideas, so we went in and pitched, and they liked some, and so they gave us a chance to write it.
Mm.
And so that's how TV works. Yeah, you write something, a calling card script, they call it, something that it shows, what you're good at.
Oh, okay.
And
So you,
then you show it around. And then they invite you in and ask you about what stories you'd like to write for their show.
oh, okay. Okay. So you have worked on shows that seems like a total creative explosion, right? That you have worked with the P.V. Hermans to South Park. Now, people probably imagine that could be the chaos 24 by 7. But let me ask you that what one show you have worked on that people assume that was very chaos behind the scene, but actually it was not?
I see. Yeah. So, um, yeah, well, so for a while I worked on Tom Arnold's show. So Tom Arnold was married to Roseanne Barr at the time, and she had her own TV show.
Hmm.
And she was kind of one of those super powerful stars that, you don't say no to, she gets her way whenever she wants. And it's kind of a tough TV show. The atmosphere there was, you had to listen to her. And if she had a, argument with the producers, she would always win because she had all this power. Um, so that was kind of chaotic. Um, and It's interesting though. Another show, Alf. Alf was another show
Alf.
about an
Mm,
alien puppet.
mm,
And that was actually a pretty calm show to work on.
mhm.
But there were some incidents where the actor who played the father. So you have to understand this is a TV show about this little puppet. That he look he looks like an alien. He's a sort of furry little, almost looks like a teddy bear, but he's an alien. And so usually we have very little problem on that show. No chaos. But this one week, the actor was like 40, 50 years old. We gave him the script, and there's a line in there where I guess he was making fun of the puppet, the Alf character, and he didn't want to say that line.
Oh,
And he
okay.
probably heard about temperamental actors. And he locked himself in his dressing room all day long, and he wouldn't come out because he kept saying, "I won't. I wouldn't say that to Alf. I wouldn't say that to." So he stayed in there all day, and we had to shut down production. So that's chaos. Right now
Okay.
you have all these cameramen. They're in there, and you have to pay them by the
Mm.
hour, and they can't get anything done. So right, it was like that was chaos.
Okay.
But
So,
the next day, the guy showed up for work and he brought a case of Dom Perignon champagne, really fancy champagne.
oh, okay.
Gave everybody on the show. He gave them, and he apologized.
Oh, okay. So every writer, I know that there's a one writer's room that scar them. Where the launch disappear, the temper could be the explode, right? So what's the most mentally exhausting writer's room you have been in, and how did you survive it?
Yes. Well, there was um, there was one writer's room
Hmm.
where the executive producer. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to get sued, but he was very tough.
Okay.
The showrunner on this particular show.
Hmm.
And we had story meetings on Friday afternoons, and he would assign us the script to write, and we had to write the whole thing and turn it in on Monday morning.
Hmm.
So imagine this, that's your weekend, right? You
Hmm.
normally do things with your family, and it normally takes 2 weeks to write a script. So, but it was pretty severe working conditions. Basically, my partner and I stayed in the office for 2 whole days, just 48 hours straight trying to
Wow.
write those things. That was one case. We had another case where a writer, the showrunner, again, I don't want to mention his name either, but uh, the whole staff would come. So you have to understand there, maybe 15 writers on
Hmm.
staff, and we all sit in the room. and we try to come up with, stories or jokes and things together. And this particular showrunner, so he's a very powerful guy,
Hmm.
and he's had a lot of hit shows, very wealthy guy. And he would have his tailor come in, and while we're all sitting around trying to pitch ideas and solve problems for the show, he would have his tailor measuring him for a suit,
Okay.
measuring him for clothes. And then, he would say, yeah, I like this suit. Let's have 6 of these sent to my Aspen house, and let's have some sent to my, Beverly Hills home.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyway, it's kind of lived in a dream world where he didn't care about our time. It's like kind of crazy. We had to sit there and watch all this. We're all thinking, geez, we could be home with our families,
Yeah, I agree.
Could be home relaxing and watching a football game. But
That would be more relaxing.
exactly. So yeah, you can imagine how that felt. The staff was not very pleased.
Yeah. So in your life that you have written so many scripts, right? But we all need that one script. So is there a moment in your career where you thought that this script is going to break you?
Oh, I feel like I'm about to give up on it. Yeah, this is true. Yeah, there were some difficult scripts. Yeah, I know this sometimes happens in show business that we had an idea for a movie,
Hmm.
and my wife and I ended up writing it. It was called Stepping Out, and it was a pretty good deal. We got De Laurentiis gave us plenty of time to write it, and they paid us, $50,000 or something.
Okay.
Anyway, so we took our time. We did a really good job with it, and then we turned it in. And then this happens in Hollywood all the time. They give you notes on it, and usually it's the studio executives are thinking, how can we improve this script, Anyway, so we did several drafts of it, and we were very happy with it. And then we turned it in, and we didn't hear anything for a long time, And
Oh,
that
okay.
sometimes happens in Hollywood.
Hmm.
And we started hearing rumors like, uh, one positive rumor was that Will Smith is interested in the script, and that would be a big deal if he
Hmm.
acted in it. And then after a while, we heard nothing more, and it's kind of heartbreaking after all this work. Um, it's there's a thing called turnaround where the script basically, uh, you know, and because the studio bought it, they own it.
Hmm.
So we worked so hard on this. This is a year of our life, and very frustrating. And they own
So,
the rights, and so I can't do anything with it. And it's it's a great idea. I wish I could, sell it somewhere else.
so for in your career, that what is the longest period of time that you face nothing, like you didn't hear anything from Hollywood or anywhere else? What is the longest period of time?
You see, yeah. Uh, well, it started happening more after I got to be around 55 years old.
Uh,
When you're older, kind of forget about you. But there were some writer strikes. Now, the Writers Guild of America is a union,
Hmm.
and they sometimes they strike for better wages and better working conditions and things, right?
Mhm.
So during one strike, I
Hmm.
think it went 9 months. We were out of work, um, but we that's when we decided. So we write half-hour sitcoms primarily, things like South Park and uh, what I guess Abbott Elementary is another one that's on right now. But back then, we were out of work for like a really long time, and we are trying to think how to make some money. So it turns out that the cartoons have a different union.
Okay.
we've, my partner and I wrote a lot of cartoons during our career. And in fact, we created the Wild Thornberrys TV show and created another show called Space Cats and another show called Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Anyway, so you can still make money during a writer's strike if you're writing cartoons. So we ended up doing that. We worked on a bunch of shows.
Okay.
Winnie the Pooh was one of them, and that year Winnie the Pooh won an Emmy, so that was exciting. But yeah, it's tough when your guild is on strike. You really, if you break the strike, they call you a scab. You ever heard that term where you're not allowed to go to work for a company when you're in a strike. So
Yeah, agree. So when you write a script, that from where the great script come from? Is it from the joy, pain, or the pure deadline panic?
oh yeah, it does help to have a deadline. I know. It's like in my book, which I'll just show.
Rockstar screenwriter.
How
Okay.
to be a rock star screenwriter.
Mhm.
I talk about um, it's a tough job because you have to get up every day and try to write 3 or 5 pages a day, and writers everywhere have lots of problems with that. It's because especially when you're trying to motivate yourself, and so I found you tend to get more done when you have a hard deadline.
Okay.
For example, that show
Hmm.
where we had to finish the script by Monday morning.
Hmm.
We had to start Friday night. It really forces you to do your to try your hardest. You don't always get your best product that way, but at least you get it done. Um, in fact, there's a technique in the book. Again,
Hmm.
there's for people who have trouble sitting down and writing every day, and that the
Mhm.
book is for writers who are just trying to make it and break into Hollywood. But there's a technique called the Pomodoro technique. It's like
Okay.
the Pomodoro is Italian for tomato,
Okay.
and I don't know if you've seen them, but there's a lot of timers. They call them tomato timers. They're little plastic things, and you twist them, and then
Uh-huh.
they count off the seconds and the minutes. But somebody came up with this idea. He calls it the Pomodoro technique, where you give yourself a deadline. So even though there's no boss or anything,
Hmm.
you give yourself an artificial deadline, and you turn on your timer, and
Okay. Yeah.
you wait, like I would do maybe 2 hours of working,
Hmm.
then like an hour of time off.
Hmm.
So you time those periods. And usually what happens is, and you have to think of it this way, that I'm going to write as if this was a real deadline, as if I really had to turn in, those pages.
So do you believe that panic will give you the more creativity?
Yeah, the panic helps. It does. It gets you going. I mean, it can backfire. That's true. Too much panic, you could just lose your mind a bit and not be able to work at all, being so anxious.
Yeah. So
But a
many,
certain amount of it works.
yeah. So e- everyone there's noticed that everyone says that be bold or be fresh, right? Everyone need a fresh script, original script, everyone says. But if the script doesn't sound like whatever that's not hot on the Netflix, it goes nowhere. So many times the Hollywood tells that writers has to be the original, but sometimes they are punishes you that anyone not writing the trends. So there always wants to be a trending. What is the trending things they want to do, right?
Right,
So
right.
what's the real rule behind that one?
Yeah, the real rule, and I should say this up front, that Hollywood, it doesn't have any absolute rules.
Okay.
There's no, but the rule, I have a chapter about it in the book called "You have to be original, but not too original." In other
Okay.
words, it has to sound familiar and original. So,
Hmm.
if you write a movie that's a lot like Lethal Weapon, or the one of the big superhero movies, but it has a twist in it that's very original.
Hmm.
That's where you hit the sweet spot, where you have it somewhat original, but not totally original. In other words, if you write a totally original script, it might not have like a beginning, middle, and an end, even. It might just be kind of crazy. So you can't be too original. And at least when it comes to Hollywood. It's true, though, independent films,
Hmm.
sometimes you see those films that go to Sundance Film Festival, and they don't have a beginning, middle, and end necessarily. But it's safer if you want to sell scripts to have some structure to it, and like I say, a beginning, middle, and an end. And I talk about that in the book too, just how familiar you can be and just how original you need to be.
So do you believe that in a Hollywood or anywhere else that writers sometimes become a self-destructive or they have habit to have the self-destruction?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you have chapters on this too.
Okay.
There's a whole chapter on how the personality of a writer, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so writing tends to be a very solitary job. You have
Hmm.
to sit there and type on the computer, and normally it's just you and the computer screen,
Hmm.
and you're all alone. It's isolating, and it's very frustrating
Hmm.
because you have to come up with all the answers yourself.
Hmm.
So you do see a lot of writers, and it's kind of famous. I mean, going outside just screenwriters, but like Ernest Hemingway had a big drinking problem
Hmm.
and eventually got, depressed and committed suicide even. But yeah, and writers tend to, and a lot of famous writers drank a lot. Um,
Okay.
and I don't know if you knew, but um, Stephen King, for example,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote his first few books. And this is all on his, he has a book called On Writing, where he, admits that he drank. He would drink all night and use cocaine. And I think some of the early books, like Carrie, for example, and they
Okay.
were successful.
Hmm.
Uh, but at some point, he realized that that was going to be too self-destructive. And I think his family made him go to rehab and things like that. And also, Aaron Sorkin admits to using cocaine when he was writing his early scripts.
Okay.
So
So as you are a psychotherapist,
that's what I think of drug use, or alcohol.
so as you are a psychotherapist, that do you get any clients that who are already a writer and they already have the depressed? What are the common symptoms that you can see in them?
Oh, yeah, no, I do have a lot of my clients are writers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are just newbie writers. They're just learning how to write.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating. What you find out is that writers encounter a lot of rejection. Even the best writers. Again, there's a whole chapter on this in the book. It's called Almost Nobody Sells Their First Script. So they said like an average, somebody did a survey and they found it on average,
Mm-hmm.
screenwriters had to write 8 scripts before they would sell one.
Oh, okay.
And then even the pros, like the big shot screenwriters like Aaron Sorkin, they don't sell all of their screenplays.
Hmm.
It's a tough business. So that can be very self-destructive. It puts you a lot of depression, can kick in, frustration. So a lot of the clients I deal with are, they, I try to counsel them about how to have a better mindset that will help with that. For example, um, one thing I tell all the writers is just because you write a script and it doesn't sell, that's not the end of the world.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is that in Hollywood, everybody needs a spec script to show around. It's like the calling card script,
Okay.
I call it. And it's the script that you show. It's like an example of your best work.
Hmm.
And it's the script you show to producers or agents and try to get an agent or a manager and try to get a job writing a screenplay. So it all starts with having that calling card script. So you
Okay.
can write a calling card script that's so good, it gets you jobs, it gets you agents, it gets you a lot of attention, but it doesn't sell.
Hmm.
So I constantly remember that when I'm writing something, I say, tell myself, it's okay if it doesn't sell, I can use this for something else. It'll be useful and career-wise. So
So
yeah, that's
in your career, that if you written any script, right?
right.
Suppose if you written any script and that was rejected, but you feel that it was very touchy to your heart and that is really close to your heart, that particular script. Have you ever thought to direct yourself or create that screenplay, like a short film or anything on a YouTube or kind of thing?
Yes, yes. No, I think about that a lot. And I do have a low budget script that I'd like I
Hmm.
did once. I shot a short film and it
Hmm.
was very fun. It was a comedy and it was kind of, an adventure comedy, you know,
Okay.
out to the desert and shot it with my friends.
Like a Jumanji?
Yeah, but Jumanji, except with
Yeah.
no really good actors, terrible actors. But yeah, like for example, this script, this low budget horror film. And when I say low budget,
Uh-huh.
$2 million is low budget in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
It's so that script, I would love to direct it, but it costs a lot of money, so I don't want to spend my own money on
Yeah, I agree. I
$2 million.
agree. Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah, I often think about that. I wish I could.
okay. Uh, so many times that we found that writers should be the vulnerable, right? But whenever writers try to pitch their particular script, they are become too emotional in the room, right? So how does a writer navigate that contradiction?
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, pitching it's an art form. So when I say pitching in Hollywood, that's how scripts end up getting made.
Mhm.
Like on television, I was on a lot of TV shows, and we would have to pitch. Um, like going into South Park, we had, all these ideas, and
Mhm.
we usually go in with 9 or 10 ideas, and you pitch the best ones. And yeah, it's tricky because if they, kind of shut down the first 4 or 5, and you start to lose confidence.
Hmm.
Um, and the other way movies get made is like in the case of that movie Stepping Out that I was telling you about, we went into, we pitched it all over the place. We pitched it like a famous director named Richard Donner. He directed the Lethal Weapon movies.
Mhm.
So the producer had us drive up to the guy's house in the Topanga Canyon and pitch it to him there. We went into his living room and pitched. A lot of pressure on you. And that was our first feature pitch. So we're just in our kids in our 20s.
Hmm.
But yeah, it can be uh, very difficult. You're talking to a very experienced director like Richard Donner,
Mhm.
producers, and you're just kind of new. But you have to get over that. And as a psychotherapist, I do help a lot of writers with that process. It's about getting confidence.
Yeah. So how
And
many times that you did practice?
Yeah, sometimes you do practice over and over. I know. Yeah, early in our career, we used to like we went into those more committee pitch sessions. We would practice to get but just about anybody to listen to me pitch, listen to me pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
These poor people listening, but it paid off, and it gets easier. When I pitch things today, it's much easier.
Right. So, do you think that great writing requires a little madness, or is that a dangerous myth that we use to excuse sufferings?
That's a very good question. Um, yeah, after looking at it through the eyes of a psychotherapist,
Hmm.
I tend to think that okay, there's a creative impulse.
Hmm.
It helps to have that. So it helps if you have a track record of being a creative person all through your life, even just a kid when you're playing around and stuff. But I don't know if you need to be mad. I don't know if you need to go to be depressed or, severely anxious
Hmm.
to do it.
Hmm.
But I do have chapters on that also
Okay.
in the book. There's a condition called the highly sensitive person. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And another psychotherapist wrote a book on it. Her name is Elaine Aron. And some people out there might feel like people in creative, careers, they do tend to feel this way that they're very sensitive, right?
Hmm.
And a highly sensitive person is someone who can get easily ruffled, get like going out in rush hour traffic is tough for them. And going to the market while everybody's there with their shopping carts and running around,
Hmm.
it's hard. So sometimes you see this with creative people and hand in hand with the writers who work all by themselves most of the time.
Hmm.
There is that sensitivity, and it's hard to learn. You have to kind of learn how to maintain your confidence
Yeah.
despite that. And in some cases, a lot of those things are environmental. Like I was saying, you go out in rush hour traffic. Uh, the people who have this overly sensitive personality, I kind of, encourage them to stay away from rush hour. Like go, do your errands in
Yeah.
earlier day or something.
Sometimes you don't get any that positive vibes.
Right, right. And like my brother lives in Arizona, and
Hmm.
it's like, it's right about now, the summertime, it's like over 100 degrees almost every day.
Wow.
So they usually do everything, like they get up at 6 or 5:30 in the morning when it's cool out,
Oh, yeah.
while they're shopping then. So
Okay. So in Hollywood, everyone's talk about the wellness, right? But the reality that you expected to be like a monk at 10 a.m. and the demoniac by the midnight. So what's the truth?
the truth about, you mean, which part of that?
Like studio talk about the well-being, right? But sometimes that you are written till 3 a.m.,
Oh, I see what you mean.
right? So does the industry secretly reward the burnout?
Right. Yeah, no, I have a chapter on this subject.
Hmm.
There's a thing that writers and other creative people, they talk about it, they call it like a flow
Okay.
state of flow, where ideas seem to come easier. And
Hmm.
usually that happens when you can block off. Like for me, I like to work at night. So
Hmm.
like I'll be up, like my best, probably most productive time to write is like maybe from 10 o'clock at night
Hmm.
till 3 in the morning.
Hmm.
So I think that's what you're talking about, where you're staying up all night.
Yeah.
And, and one of the reasons is there's very few distractions at 2 a.m. You
Hmm.
know, that's another thing that writers have an issue with is distractions. It's like checking your email and going on Facebook and those sorts of things. It's very easy to get sidetracked. But yeah, during those early hours, some people like to write early in the morning too. They get up at 5 in the morning and write.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's an individual thing. Like I say in the chapter I have about that, I try to help people find out what is the best time for them. And there's a whole chapter on the best workspace also. Some people like to write in a dark room with a couple lights
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Some people like music in the background.
Hmm.
Some people like to open the windows and look out at if they have a great view.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's individual. I think it's not one size fits all. But like I said, there's a lot of information in the book. There's a whole section on being more productive. How can you write more? How can you get more done?
So what is your best way to write that? Like you like scenery or you want to sit in the dark room? How would you write?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the dark room,
Oh, okay.
and but I like to have kind of like the TV on, but the sound down,
Uh-huh.
and I like to play music.
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly why, but I used to be a bartender, and it was kind of dark in the bar, and the TV was always on, and so maybe it reminds me.
Okay. Okay, so many times the industry loves to glorify, right? They are like messy and the raw writers until they show up the way in the room. Is there a space for emotional truth anymore, or it just the marketing?
I see. Well, I think what you're getting at is, yeah, I mean, there's usually some kernel
Hmm.
of authenticity or truth, and usually there's some kind of I hate to say the word moral, but most good movies have an emotional arc, where you feel like the character's grown and have maybe learned something during this their journey.
Hmm.
And I think that's important. And, if as a writer, sometimes you look inside and find your own truth and try to, play around with that and see how that. I know there's a lot of writers who, every time they write a script, they try to pick some sort of emotional challenge that they've gone through so they relate to it better. And I think it probably shows in the writing.
Okay. So you have sit in the both chair, right? As a writer, as a therapist. Who lies better, the client or the writers?
Um, let's see. Who likes
Better.
who likes me better? Is that what you're saying?
No, no. Who lies better?
Who do I like better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Who talk lies, mostly lies. Mostly your clients or the writers are lies.
I see. Yeah, I do like my clients generally.
Oh,
Um,
okay. They are lying.
I like them. Yeah, usually. A lot of my clients, like I say, are they're doing well right now. I
Hmm.
mean, I have clients who's created a little TV show that it's on the internet,
Okay.
and but yeah, it's tough. Sometimes I really don't like writing because it's so hard.
Hmm.
It's so hard to get up every day and do the same thing every day.
Hmm.
But yeah, also being a therapist can be very challenging too.
Okay.
Some
So you write.
clients they don't respond well to your treatment. That
Yeah, agree. Agree. Many
uh,
times that the clients or the say patients, they are not telling you truth, right? Many times.
that's true too. Yeah, it takes a
When they talk about the mental health, mostly they want to hide many things, not something, many things.
yeah. Usually they're too embarrassed to say the truth. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So you write about very high sensitivity people in your book. So in
Yes.
an industry that demands thick skin, right? And the quick comebacks, is there any room left for the deeply sensitive person?
Yeah, I think it's harder for those people, and I understand what you're saying. Yeah, especially that group we were talking about before, the highly sensitive
Yeah.
people. But there's also people have social anxiety too.
Hmm.
Some people are just not comfortable around groups of people. And imagine if you're socially anxious and you have to go into a room full of studio people and pitch a
Hmm.
movie idea or a TV idea. It's hard, but But I have some steps that people can follow in the book, how to get over those kinds of anxiety. And yeah, it's not easy, but there's a lot of good advice about how to pitch in a room and that sort of thing.
So from your book, that which chapter felt like a therapy to write?
That's an interesting question. Which chapter felt like therapy to write? Well, I did feel like there's a chapter on what is the writer's personality.
Mhm.
And that's when I touched on how writers tend to work alone and it can be isolating. And I kept thinking about my own, my situation. And that I felt like I was working through some issues. And so in that sense, probably that chapter felt therapeutic, yeah.
So as you have the book title, that how to be a rock star screenwriter,
How to be a rock star screenwriter.
right? Exactly.
It's
But the
on
rock star,
Amazon, by the way. Amazon.
okay, I'll take a look. So, but the rock stars are often chaotic, self-destructive, and the egoistic.
Good point.
Isn't that a weird feat for someone preaching the mental wellness?
I see. Somebody with mental illness, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's funny when you think about rock stars.
Hmm.
A lot of them had, you know, these personalities that got them into trouble. Like
Hmm.
you were saying before, um, that creative stereotype of, an extremely creative person who indulges in drugs and sex and rock and roll.
Hmm.
It's easy, and then you see some of the famous suicides. Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, all these people. It does happen, and I'm sure there's writers who go through that as well. It's not easy. Like I said, Hemingway
Hmm.
famously was very depressed. He was addicted to alcohol, and eventually he shot himself with a shotgun.
So, do you believe that Hollywood has a stereotype that the writers always be a psycho person?
No, no, no. It's
No.
different for everybody. I
Okay.
think I think it's probably a tendency of all writers to have some sort of neurotic
Hmm.
features.
Hmm.
They tend to worry too much, right?
Hmm.
They tend to overthink everything
Hmm.
because they have to be perfectionists in a way.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, there's probably a few, I would say, more neurotic
Hmm.
possibilities for creative people. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as for your book, let's be honest that if you handle this book to 28-old boy or person, right?
Yeah.
What part would you be totally roll his eyes at?
What would he roll his eyes at?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I never thought about that. Boy. Well, maybe I try to make I try to make it seem I try to be optimistic about
Okay.
people's chances. And that might be, where they would maybe roll their eyes a bit. I try to find like a reason, like there's a chapter on um, trying to break into Hollywood as an older writer.
Hmm.
And it's not, to be honest, I don't want to dissuade anybody, but I think you should still try if you really love it. But yeah, there is ageism in Hollywood, that
Hmm.
once you're over a certain age. But in the book, I talked about if you are over 50 or over
Hmm.
40,
Hmm.
but your best, uh, like you'd be better off spending your time on features, for example, uh, feature film scripts, because in TV,
Hmm.
everybody works in a room together now, and they tend to be about the same in their 30s, 40s tops. So it's easier to get jobs
Okay.
doing certain things, like a feature film writer. once they've written a script, it doesn't matter what they look like, right? Because
Right.
they're going to go out and get a camera and shoot it. But on a TV show, when they hire you, it's more like you're coming into work every day, and you got to get along with everybody. And so the stereotype, the ageism thing kicks in a little bit worse.
Yeah, agree. So have you ever written something that completely you are disagree with, but just to keep job that you have written it?
Yeah. Well, there's an aspect of selling screenplays
Yeah.
uh, where the studio gives you notes. And
They ask you to change it.
yeah, so if they want you to do it a certain way, you might disagree with them,
Hmm.
but it's in your interest to agree with them on uh, it's like you've got to give them the whole thing about notes is like, so they may tell you uh, we need a female character in here. We need more action sequences. We need, different, and you might disagree on some of those points, but if you want to keep your job, it's best to
Yeah,
at
I
least
agree.
make them happy. Try to do your best to,
Mhm.
you don't have to give them everything they want, but yeah. Um, but and that's the way I'm thinking about your question right now. Is that would you want to be true to your it's like my instincts are telling me to do it this way, but if the guy who's paying you has a strong opinion, you might want to consider it.
I agree. For the job survival, you have to do that. You don't have any
That's right.
choice.
It's the real world.
Exactly. So what's the rule for the new writers obsess over that really doesn't matter?
What's the rule for the new writers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, new writers got to be careful because there's a lot of myths in Hollywood. It's good for new writers to be aware that they might have to write, 3 or 4 screenplays before they sell something.
Okay.
It doesn't happen overnight. You do hear overnight stories, but usually if research it, you'll find out that it took this person, this famous screenwriter, and probably took them a
Mhm.
lot longer. Um, and there's other sort of myths about that too. But yeah, new writers need to get over the myths. And
Okay.
yeah,
So you help people overcome that procrastinations, but
right.
what's your personal mental block as a writer?
Okay. Yes, since you mentioned it. So it's gotten harder to sell feature scripts these days, unless they're low budget.
Okay.
There's just a trend. Hollywood is taking fewer and fewer risks. And
Hmm.
so when I say that, I just mean instead of rolling the dice with a new screenwriter, they're more likely to give all the projects to their A list, the guys who have a track record of writing hits. And so that has scared me off of writing like a big blockbuster movie myself because I know they're not looking at a guy like me for that. If a low budget film, action, comedy, that's more like what they're looking at. So I let that, I let that kind of guides me a little bit. It makes me afraid to write certain things. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what you're talking about.
In Hollywood, does it? Did you found anything that everyone wants to like to have that you write what you know, right? But
Um,
don't go too much personal. So sometimes suppose that if you are written about like a biography or something else that you want to written something about who achieved so many things in their life, but you are going too personal. Do you believe that is real or that many times the director asks you to remove that something personal comments kind of thing?
yeah, it's a little bit like that. What we talked about before, you can't your script, it can't be too original. It has to
Hmm.
have a beginning, middle, and end like a movie. Um, but yeah, too personal also. It's yeah, it's sometimes what we know is kind of boring, you know. So when they say write what you know, it might not be the most interesting thing. Like I don't know anything about being a spy or like James Bond or anything,
Yeah.
you know. But they tend to make movies about that larger than life characters, right? You know, superheroes and things. So if I stuck to writing only about what I know, it'd be very limited.
Have you tried artificial intelligence to write something?
Oh, you know, I did experiment a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I signed up for a class on that, and it's for novels and nonfiction books, really, primarily.
Okay.
And what I found out was, like, for example, Amazon, where most people sell their books, they have a policy they don't want any AI written books.
Oh, okay.
But it turns out that there's a middle ground where you can have AI assisted books. So in
Hmm.
other words, you can ask AI some questions and like do the research for you, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But you have to write it yourself. And so I firmly believe that that's a smart idea. Yeah, because I understand that people who tell AI to go off and write a book or a script,
Yeah.
and without any input, you know, it won't be that great. It's kind of mediocre at this point. You know, someday it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
it's a
let's.
very scary notion, though, since you bring that up. Because I have a Facebook group,
Hmm.
and I mentioned AI on there, and everybody's like, "No, that's the devil."
I know, I
You
know.
know, they're very
Right now,
scared.
everyone is getting scared, right? Even the today that if you saw that Google I/O, oh my God, so many things they are bringing right now that you
Yeah.
sometimes you won't believe that how many things are coming into the world.
No, yeah. One of my clients, he's a genius, and he's developing an AI tool for pilots and for air traffic controllers. It'll just give them more real-time access to information like airspeed and who's coming in from the west and it helps and he's probably going to make a lot of money selling that.
Yeah, agree.
But it can also the downside is it can replace people's jobs.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask 10 questions that you have the one word option. Okay. You have to give an answer in the one word only.
Just one word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plot or character,
Character.
setup or payoff,
Payoff.
dialogue or visuals,
Visual.
voiceover cheat or tool.
What's that one again?
It's a cheat or tool.
Oh, tools, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So overrated or underrated.
Uh, Underrated.
Okay. And villains charming or cruel.
Charming. Always charming.
uh, cage or compass.
Kids or compass?
Hmm.
I see. Compass, I guess.
Uh, rewrite joy or torture.
A torture.
And the one word or the one emotion every story needs.